Hi, my name is Rebecca Law, and today I'll be talking to you about transitioning South Australia's energy system. So as we are keenly aware, South Australia's energy market is rapidly changing, as seen in the closure of the Northern Power Station and last week's announcement of the Port Augusta Solar Thermal Station. Our energy mix is in the process of major upheaval. With this comes a number of different challenges that we are facing as a state and as a nation in the process of transitioning to a reliable, secure and affordable energy system. Some of those challenges that we are facing include a changing generation mix away from traditional coal and gas powered stations to more renewable technologies such as wind, solar and battery storage. With this, there's been a lot of attention both from the consumer perspective, the government and in the media about energy affordability and the rising retail electricity costs. And one for the policymakers and government is trying to find the solution of integrating these new energy technologies into our existing network. So today I'll briefly cover some of these challenges in greater detail, look at what stakeholders are doing to address them, and touch a bit upon SACOSS's work in a few areas, including system security, SA Power Networks appeal, the Eyre Peninsula Transmission proposal, and Port Augusta Solar Thermal Station. So as we can see from these two graphs, the energy generation mix in South Australia is rapidly changing. On the left here, we can see the fuel mix for 2010-2011 period, and approximately 3/4 of our energy source comes from gas or coal. We've got about 21% coming from wind power sources, a little bit from solar PV, but not a lot. When we move over to 2015-2016, we can see that the proportion of gas and coal-fired power is a little bit under 50%. There's been a slightly bigger uptake of wind-powered generation, an increase of uptake in rooftop PV, and there's been a greater reliance on our interconnectors, which in times of high demand, we rely on energy from our eastern states. So in order to understand some of these challenges in greater detail, in managing that transition away from these conventional energy sources, SACOSS as an advocacy body are firmly aware of the impact on vulnerable and disadvantaged individuals, households and communities in terms of electricity costs and access to the technologies that we described earlier. SACOSS has strongly advocated for these vulnerable groups to be protected from the transition costs associated in our energy system. So first of all, in order to understand some of those challenges, we'll delve a little bit into system security and what that means. So system security has been brought into focus for all South Australians, particularly following the September 28 statewide blackout last year. There's been much debate and discussion around system security, with the South Australian government releasing our energy plan aimed at improving our energy security and reliability. But what does this actually mean? So a secure power system is one that is able to continue operating within defined technical limits, even if there's an incident such as the loss of an interconnector, a major transmission line or large generator. So in the energy system, supply and demand must remain balanced at all times. So too much energy in the grid or not enough at any one time can cause major disruption to our system. As you can see here, the supply and demand is measured by frequency and must be kept at 50 Hertz at all times and operate within this normal operating band. Large frequency deviations outside of this 50 Hertz technical limit can result in load shedding or generation tripping. In order to keep the systems in balance, we always have to predict the energy supply and demand and keep the system within its technical limits. And this process is monitored and managed by Australian Energy Market Operator, or AEMO, who are the independent market operator in Australia. Another important aspect of system security is system inertia. So system inertia refers to the ability of a system to cope with these sudden imbalances, as seen in the previous slide. So inertia is a process that is naturally provided by spinning generators, motors and other devices that are synchronized to the frequency of the system. So historically in the NEM, traditional generators such as coal and gas-fired power stations have plentiful inertia. However, many of the new generation technologies such as wind turbines, solar panels are not synchronized to the grid and have low or no physical inertia, and therefore they're currently limited in their ability to cope with these rapid changes in frequency. So as we move away from coal and gas to wind and solar, there are major impacts on the operation of the power system due to the different technical characteristics of the different generation mix gives, and how that makes sure that we are able to operate the system in a secure operating state. So we'll now move on to a few issues that SACOSS have been actively involved in, one of which is the SA Power Networks appeal. So SA Power Networks is South Australia's network distribution business. Every 5 years, the Australian Energy Regulator, or AER, sets the revenue that the network business, such as SAPN, are allowed to recover, as well as the maximum prices that they can charge. So in the most recent revenue determination process in 2015, the AER determined that SAPN could raise $3.84 billion in revenue from customers between the period of 2015 to 2020. Now, SAPN initially challenged that decision via the Australian Competition Tribunal to seek an extra $250 million for costs related to financing, labour and bushfire safety. That challenge was unsuccessful, with AER's final revenue determination upheld. Currently, SAPN is disputing the decision in the federal court. SACOSS continues to advocate quite strongly that AER's final revenue determination be upheld, as we believe it is unnecessarily contributing to high network costs, which of course get passed on to the consumer. Another issue that SACOSS has been involved in is Electronet's transmission proposal. So Electronet, similar to SAPN, are required to submit revenue proposals to the AER to set the revenue allowance every 5 years in the regulatory period. As part of the most recent process, Electronet proposed a new project to upgrade the Eyre Peninsula transmission network for an expenditure of approximately $80 million. Electronet's regulatory business proposal contends that components of the transmission line serving the lower Eyre Peninsula are reaching the end of their functional life and will require replacement in the next few years. SACOSS engaged with some external consultants in its response to the Electronet's regulatory business proposal. Through that process, we raised concerns over the proposed expenditure to undertake the transmission upgrades, particularly as there was a lack of evidence to suggest that replacement of sections of the transmission line would significantly improve reliability and public safety. Should these costs then be passed on to the consumer, our consultants estimated that the average cost per customer would be around $2,500 or around $15 million per megawatt of peak demand on that transmission line. So SACOSS will continue to advocate that projects carried out under regulatory proposals such as these should be well evidenced, transparent and reasonably costed to prevent any undue costs being passed on to the consumer. Any proposals under these regulatory reviews should add significant consumer benefit under SACOSS's view. And finally, to end on a slightly more positive note, as many of you will be aware, last week the South Australian government announced that US company Solar Reserve had won a tender to build a new $650 million solar thermal plant in Port Augusta. The new 150 megawatt solar thermal plant named Aurora will power over 495 gigawatts of power annually, which equates to around 5% of SA's energy needs. The project will support 700 jobs during the construction phase, with 50 full-time workers on an ongoing basis once the plant is operational. The plant will have a 1,100 megawatt hour energy storage capacity and will be capable of storing up to 8 hours of full load even after sunset. So SACOSS are quite supportive of this project as part of the transition to the new energy mix in South Australia, particularly in terms of the impact it will have on the community in Port Augusta. Thank you.